28 years.
So let us recite one invocation. Many of you are aware of the... Thank you. So many of you are probably aware of this syllable Om. So we'll recite an invocation before we start. So this is Om, then Namo Bhagavate. So Vasudevaya. So Vasudev refers to the divinity that is all pervading within us and without us. So we are trying to invoke that divinity to guide us toward wisdom. Namo is offering our respects. Bhagavate is the divinity who is all pervading. So you can try to repeat after me. Take 3 deep breaths. So each of these sounds we'll try to draw out loudly as long as we can. So together. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Let's take 3 deep breaths. Let's do it once more. As you're uttering the sound, just let yourself experience the sound and experience the immensity of the divinity that we're connecting through the sound. Together. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. One last time. Let's take 3 deep breaths. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Thank you. Thank you for coming today. And I'll be using this as a whiteboard for writing or drawing some things. So the broad topic I'll take today is a topic that struck me in my childhood itself. So broadly, the topic is the nature of human nature. Nature of human nature might seem a little abstract, but it is basically, why do people do what they do? Have any of you been hurt by anyone? Have any of you been hurt by anyone? I know, isn't it? So that's such a weird question. Who has not been hurt, isn't it? So we would be a very rare species if we have never been hurt by anyone. Now, generally, if we are hurt by someone, this hurt can broadly be of three kinds. One is somebody unintentionally hurts us. So they speak something that is hurtful. They do something that is hurtful. Where they didn't really mean to hurt us. So if somebody is walking through a crowded street and they're running because they have to get somewhere and they step on our foot. So that's unintentional. Now, it hurts, but still it's relatively easy to overlook it. Yeah, it just happened. But then, sometimes people know that something will hurt us. So what is the other category for unintentional would be? Intentional. So they know that it's hurtful and still they hurt. Now, in intentional also, there could be two distinct categories. Now, one is where it's just impulsive. That means they got angry and under the rush of the impulse, they spoke something. And maybe after that they apologize or after they try to make up. So it was at that time intentional. But still it was more of a heat of the moment or rush of the blood at that particular time. So maybe they were just upset about something and they did something. So about this kind of, it's intentional but it's impulsive. Often we say about this is hurt people hurt people. The people who are hurt others. So I am angry about something that you have done. And it's just that I'm so worked up at that time, I speak something that hurts you. But beyond that, there is something that is calculative. There are some people who do seem to get a perverse pleasure in hurting others. So it's one thing to hurt out of not knowing. Another thing is to hurt just because we are hurt and it's a rush of blood. Other is to calculate and do something which will hurt the other person the most. Often, especially, now this can hurt in both ways. If somebody who is our enemy, hopefully we don't have any enemies, but I think that hope is hopeless in one sense. There are people somehow who become hostile to us to different degrees. But there are enemies, but especially if it's a friend. Somebody whom we consider to be a friend and that person betrays us. That person maybe leaks something confidentially that we had told them. So, please come. We are all cannibals. You'll be eaten alive. Yeah, thank you for coming. So now, basically, when this happens, so at that time, how do you deal with it? So many of us may or may not believe in God, that there is some good. There is some good that wants good for us, that wants us to be good. So broadly speaking, different religions, different traditions may have different conceptions of God in particular. But broadly, the idea of God as it relates to humanity is that there is some being up there which wants good for us. That through whatever is happening, there is something good. And not just wants good for us, but you can say also wants us to be good. So it's like, broadly, that is the idea of God. There is some being which wants good things to happen to us, and also wants us to become good beings. So now we may or may not believe in some idea like that. However, what we cannot generally deny is that there seems to be some force which wants to hurt us and wants us to hurt. What do I mean by this? That there seems to be some kind of self-destructive force inside us. So we all have probably experienced that we do certain things that we do not want to do. We get angry at someone, we may lie, we may manipulate. Now one example which may not be harmful to others but is harmful to ourselves is addiction. Where something from within seems to push us to act in ways that we know are harmful for us. There's one addict who wrote very poetically about his relationship with alcohol. He says, "You treat me badly, I trust you madly." So we all probably have something in this category. You treat me, what is it? Badly. So, but I trust you madly. So it may be, for us, it may be something just surfing on our phone. We just feel I'm wasting so much time after it. But each time we get some notification, immediately we want to do that. We all may have things to greater or smaller degrees, but there's something which seems to bring out the dark side within us. So there is something which wants to hurt us and then wants us to become hurtful. So now, generally a person who gets addicted, they don't go out wanting to hurt anyone. They just want some coping mechanism. They have some issues in life. And probably any addictive substance just offers a quick relief or a quick escape way. But from there, it goes down a trajectory. So when I said that this was a topic, something which I started pondering since my childhood. As you may have noticed that I need crutches for walking. So when I was 1, I got polio. And after that, I could never walk normally. And by God's grace, I was good at studies. So when I was going to school and I was doing well in studies, there were other kids. Now, some kids were helpful. If I couldn't carry my luggage or something fell down, they would help me. But some kids, they just got some pleasure in teasing me, using words like cripple or whatever. Now, I wasn't really too hurt by it. And I'll come back to that a little later, why I was not. But I noticed that they seem to get a joy in trying to provoke me, in trying to hurt me. And that was the time I started thinking, we all have had experience probably of somebody who's like a bully. And that person, maybe that person externally is just like, if we are a kid at that time, that person seems to be just like a kid, but there's something off with that person. No, so when we see someone who gets joy in hurting others, then we may start thinking, is this person, you can clearly say, maybe I wouldn't want to do something like that. Hopefully we wouldn't do something like that. But still there's something different. Now we could go down this trajectory, and at one level there are people who are narcissists. So narcissists are, there are different specialists. There are heart specialists. So narcissists are eye specialists, but not eye specialists, eye specialists. So now narcissists don't really hurt others. That's not their intention. They just don't care for others. So they end up hurting others. It's like if there is a cake meant for 2 people, a narcissist will see the cake and not even think that maybe it's meant for 2 people. Just eat up all for themselves. So there are people who are narcissists, and that's it's a little annoying to be with them, and depending on how narcissistic they are. Now beyond that, there can be people who are bullies. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, why is that happening? Is it because the scope is not that much? Thank you for telling me. Okay. Okay. So, but why is that happening? Is it that you need to move the projector backward, or does it make any difference? Just the range. But I don't think that will make much difference. Is it? But anyway, let me know if. I'm getting here. Oh, okay, fine. That's okay. Okay, so I have to write over. Okay, so were you able to see everything that I was writing till now? Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. So now beyond that, there are people who are bullies. And as bullies get some joy in hurting others. Now, often people who are bullies are actually people who are themselves very insecure. So they get their sense of strength or self-worth by dominating others, by creating fear in others. But beyond that, there are people who are psychopaths and sociopaths. So such people seem to have something essential missing within them. It's as if that they just don't have a sense of empathy. That they get joy in hurting others, but how much they are hurting others, they just don't seem to care at all. So, are you able to see from there? Okay. So, it's the spectrum. If we go downwards, if we meet someone who's out to hurt us, hurt us for the sake of hurting us, and then that can be very unnerving. We all, sorry.
Nissan HGW that's blocking a car. Is there anybody's car? Yeah. Could you please move it?
So if somebody deliberately keeps a car in a blocking place and doesn't move it at all, they know it's going to cause trouble to someone else, and still they do it. Then that would be something on the spectrum. Somewhere. Most of the times, if something like that happens, it's unintentional. But there are people who want to hurt others. So till now, I have talked about these 2 things. That there is something that there is something inside people that makes them want to hurt others, and there is something inside us also which seems to make us either hurt ourselves, like in addictive cravings, or then hurt others. So what exactly is this? So when I started, I know when I used to like to read a lot, and generally in every fiction there is some hero and there's some villain, and then there's a confrontation between the 2 of them. So what I used to think is that, what makes the villain a villain? That sometimes we might just like to see the villain getting beaten up. The bad guy is lost and the good guy is won. And yeah, that we would like that to happen. But, is it that there's something intrinsically wrong in those people? Nowadays, as movies are also, the movie industry is also evolving. Whenever there are any villains, all villains, nowadays they're trying to show that there is a origin story. How did that person become a villain? Recently, I think there was a movie about the Joker, in the Spider-Man universe. In Spider-Man? Batman, sorry, yeah. Yeah, Batman. Batman is a little more darker. So, in the Batman universe, Joker is the villain. But what made him into a villain? So, even there's something a villain, there is a origin story. We'd like to have that. And if possible, we would like to have a redemption arc. So maybe the villain is not always a villain. Maybe the villain might change. So in Star Wars, there's Darth Vader. He was Anakin before. He becomes Darth Vader, probably one of the darkest forces in the universe. But then, towards the end, he changes. So the goodness of Luke brings out the goodness within him. So we would like to see something like this. So broadly, the question that comes up over here is that when we see villains, so are people basically good or basically bad? What do you think? How many of you think people are basically good? Okay. People are basically good. Okay. How many of you think we are basically good? Certainly, okay. How many of you think people are basically bad? Okay. Okay, let me soften that question. There's a part of us which would like to believe that nobody is basically bad. But then let me soften it. Are some people basically bad? Sorry?
What part of the self you're referring to? Like, are we considering like the truest self, or are you referring to like our incarnation? Because the incarnation can end up doing, things that are not as good. But of course, the truest,
Yeah.
at least from my understanding, and from my rough readings, from also Patanjali's, like the Purusha, that
Yeah.
was salt that's inherently good. So
That's true. It's a good point. I was going to come to that. Thank you. So, like sometimes you say, sometimes we might tell about somebody who's a little, say if we are friends with, we are A and we are friends with B and C, and B is really irritated with C. You might say, C is deep down a good person. Then B might say, it seems that so deep down I can't find it at all. So, so are some people basically bad? It might seem like that. So, what you rightly said, thank you, is that there are layers to the self. So I'll talk based on the Bhagavad Gita that there is our self has multiple sides. There is our body, it's our physical side. You can't see?
Yeah.
Okay. There's the body, then there's the mind. That's our mental side. And then there is the soul. That's our spiritual side. Now, what the Gita says is that at the level of the soul, everyone is good. Every soul is a part of the divine. Mamaivamsho jivaloke. Every soul is a part of the divine. So every soul, in that sense, at the core, is good. Now, having said that, the soul is surrounded by the mind. And the mind carries impressions from previous lives. So none of us come with a completely clean slate. So now the impressions in the mind, some of them may be positive and some of them may be negative. So we all carry a variety of impressions. And these impressions in Sanskrit are called as samskar. Have any of you heard this word samskar? Okay, samskar. Yeah. Now you could write this in English as samskar. so, so everybody carries some or other scar in their psyche from the past. And because of this scar, we end up having this dark side within us. So now, the Bhagavad Gita says that there are two kinds of nature. Broadly, there are two kinds of people. Some people are wise and some are otherwise. So there are people with a divine nature and there are people with a dark or a demoniac nature. Now the difference between them is that if we go back to these three levels, there is the soul, there's the mind, and there's the body. So in the divine nature, the impressions coming from the past are predominantly positive. Now there might be a little negative, and nobody is 100% good or 100% bad, generally speaking, it's very rare, but they are relatively very less. So that's broadly the divine nature. Now as contrasted to that, we have the demoniac nature. So in the demoniac nature, it's prominently the impressions are negative. There might be a little goodness. So that means some people do have impressions within them which tend to make them be harsh, be cruel. And some people are kind, polite. So interestingly, the Gita says that these are things we are inborn with. And now there is an important difference. There is inborn and there is innate. And the two are not the same things. So inborn refers to the mind. That we carry a mind with us from a previous life. And that's inborn. But innate refers to the soul. So at an innate level, each person is a good person. So nobody in that sense is innately bad. But at an inborn level, we all have certain impressions that we bring from the past. So that's why there will be people who will, by default, when situations come up, they will be kind. And there will be people who, when situations come up, they will be harsh. Probably one of the most influential books of the last century, a book which touched me also when I read it, is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. So now, there, among the many observations that Viktor Frankl makes, he says that he was basically caught in the Holocaust, he was caught in the concentration camps. And when he was there, now he was a psychologist, so he observed people over there. And it's difficult to imagine anybody being put in a more dehumanizing, more painful kind of situation. And everybody there was suffering. But he said that even there, he noticed that there is room for individuality. So for example, when people would serve food, they would just get some beer, some just soup with a little bit of vegetable in it. So even when that was to be served, the individual nature would sometimes vary. So some people would just mix it all thoroughly and distribute it equitably to everyone. Some of the servers, they would take it and they would just give the liquid to everyone, and at the end, they would have the solid for themselves. And some people would give the solids to others and take the liquid for themselves. So we will see, now it's hard to call somebody who is just taking a little bit more food for themselves as evil. But we could say that there's the people who are a little bit more selfless, remarkably selfless, and a people who are a little bit more self-concerned. So that variation we can see even in the most difficult of situations. So broadly speaking, our human life is shaped by two factors. So we all have certain conditionings that come from the past. And we can do some things about them, but they are what they are as a starting point. Now, along with the conditionings, there are our, broadly speaking, every human life story, whether it is a fictional character, a historical character, a contemporary character, so our own life story, this can be summarized broadly in 4 C's. We all have our conditionings, which we may or may not be aware of. Then we have our conditions. And then these contribute to our choices. And then the choices lead to certain consequences. So broadly, every life story, if you want to understand a person's life story, we could just look at it, oh, this happened and this person did this and this person did that, and that's entertaining. But if you want it to be illuminating, this is what we can look at. So, for example, when people become radical, people become terrorists, they become violent. So they come from India, in the neighborhood of India, there's Pakistan and Afghanistan, and a lot of people become terrorists from there. Now, some people we could say that it be attributed to poverty. That those are among the Islamic countries, those two are among the poorest countries. The Middle East has oil wealth, relatively speaking. So people become extremists because of bad conditions. That is, they just that just was the career that was available for them. We said killing innocent people is not a career, but maybe those conditions they were bad, and that's what they took up. Sometimes you say this person grew up in a bad neighborhood, and sometimes if you're in a bad neighborhood, then a person has to be tough to just survive. So now there is some truth to that, but then we'll see many of the leaders of the terrorists who instigate them, they are not poor, they are not uneducated. Osama bin Laden was from a fairly wealthy family. He was well educated. Gaddafi was well educated. Many of these people, they are fairly well educated. So to say that somebody's conditions alone caused them to do what they did, that is not true. That our conditions, they play a part. In fact, some of the most inspiring human stories are where people rise above their conditionings, or people rise above their conditions. Or their conditionings also, but above their conditions. Somebody came from a very bad neighborhood, but then that person rose to become a exemplary citizen. That person rose to achieve great things, contribute great things to society. So that inspires us. So we humans have a capacity to choose. Now our choices will definitely be affected by our conditions and our conditionings. But there's a difference between being affected versus being determined. So our conditionings and our conditions will push us in certain directions, but we have the capacity to counter push. So broadly speaking, when you talk about the life story, that I'll make 2 more points and then we will have some questions. So each of those points will take 2 hours. I spoke this once in a talk, and then one person really had a good presence. So he says, "Is that a promise or a threat?" So everybody will face some grievance in their life. Now, from grievance, there are two trajectories we can take. Grievance means we feel life is unfair to me. Something bad has happened to me. It could be that something, we are in a bad condition, or sometimes we just have some bad conditionings. We all may feel, why am I like this sometimes? Why am I the way I am? So we may have grievances with the world. We may have grievances with the way we are. Now from grievance, we can go in two directions. One is whoever we think is the cause of our grievance, we want vengeance against that person. Many movies have these vengeance stories. And, oh, this person did this to me and I'll do this. No, there is vendetta, vengeance, and people take the law in their own hands. Now in movie stuff, it may look good. But the point is that when we get too caught, when there is grievance, and then we start looking for vengeance. The problem with this is that even if we succeed in taking vengeance, the mind gets conditioned in a particular way. And then we end up starting to look for someone else to take vengeance. And this becomes a conditioning. So when we are for the grievance, we are trying to take vengeance. Then basically what is happening is our whole life is becoming, it's becoming more of a search for a villain. Who is the villain in my life because of whom my life is miserable? Now we all can probably think about someone. Maybe we had a hard childhood because of some bully. Maybe we had a sibling, and maybe that sibling was not a bad person, but we were always unfavorably compared by our parents. Now, why can't you be like that person? So often what happens is when there is grievance, we may look for vengeance. And many people, their life just gets consumed in that. Now, if we are searching for a villain, we won't find a hero. And we ourselves are unlikely to become a hero. So from vengeance, it goes down to malevolence. Vengeance is more specific toward one person who had hurt us. But malevolence becomes more indiscriminate. When I am not happy, why should anyone else be happy? So anyone who is happy is a part of the problem. So about communism, it was said that they didn't really care for the poor. They envied the rich and used the poor to pull down the rich. So what happens is that if you go downwards from vengeance to malevolence, so this is the dark trajectory of the demoniac nature. All of us, life will hurt us sometime or the other. Now, the other trajectory is acceptance. Accept that life is tough, that life hurts. One of the key truths from Eastern tradition is that that there is distress in the world. That Buddhism talks about as one of the noble truths, that dukkha. Now, when I read that in my childhood, I wondered, that life is filled with distress. Now, why would you call that a noble truth? It's a harsh truth. Why would you call it noble truth? It is among the four noble truths, that the first truth. The Bhagavad Gita also talks about this world as dukkhalaya. It's a place of distress. But the point is that when there is this acceptance that life hurts, and I am not alone in this, everyone suffers from it, then from there we can move toward transcendence. Transcendence means, okay, it's gone down. The transcendence transcended the screen. So acceptance Okay, so acceptance could refer to, going back to our earlier discussion, it could refer to our conditions. Sometimes we are just put in bad conditions. Acceptance could also refer to our conditionings. Now, when I say acceptance, doesn't mean that, okay, this is just the way I am, this is the way I'll be. No, except that we all have a starting point, and that starting point may not be good for us. But from there, we can go beyond it. We can go toward transcendence. So when I travel across the world, I speak at various places and various forums. Sometimes I'm invited to speak at places where there are forums for people with special needs. So, after I give a talk, then I talk with them. And every story is such a tragedy. Somebody lost a limb in an accident. Somebody lost an eye. Somebody lost some other limb. What strikes me is that apart from the sadness that accompanies hearing such stories, is that so many people seem to be fighting battles that were lost long ago. Maybe an accident happened and they lost a limb. It's terrible. But it's over now. It's over. We can't do anything about it. Why did this happen to me? Why did this happen to me? There's a lot of resentment about it. And as long as we are resenting, that's the opposite of acceptance. So often resentment is what makes us want to look for a villain and then go down the darker track. So now when I look back at my life, I don't really remember feeling very resentful about my physical disability. So to a large extent, I attribute this to my mother. When I was one, as I mentioned, I got polio. So I don't remember much about it. But my first memory about it was about I was 2.5 or 3. And a distant relative had come to meet us. And she was consoling my mother, saying, "It's so sad, your son got polio." And I remember my mother's voice, very calm, clear, confident. She said, "Whatever he lacks physically, God will provide him intellectually." Now, I don't know why she said that. Probably in a kid of 2.5 or 3, what intellectual ability had she seen? Maybe it was a prediction, maybe it was a hope, whatever it was. Somehow that stayed with me. And as I grew up, I couldn't play outdoor games like other kids could play. But I noticed when I would start reading, I could read quite fast. I could grasp things quickly. I could remember. I could articulate well. So somewhere at the back of my mind, it settled down. At one level, I could say that I didn't do anything to deserve the physical disability that I had. So that is, life is unfair. But then I didn't do anything to deserve the intellectual ability that I had. So in the big picture, it settled in me that life is fairly unfair. So life is unfair in some ways, but it's also fair in some ways. Because fairly unfair means that sometimes life gives us more than what we deserve. And the key choice that every one of us has to make, I said that these 4 things which shape our life trajectory, they determine our life stories. We have certain conditionings. We have certain conditions. So the choice that we have to make is, what is it that I'm going to fixate on? Am I going to fixate on this, or am I going to fixate on this? That how life is unfair to me, how life has treated me badly, and from that will be grievance. That's true. It's a fact of life. But from that grievance, if I fixate on how life is unfair to me, I'll go down towards vengeance. I want to find someone who has hurt me. And then from vengeance, it'll go down to malevolence. And sometimes we may not actually hurt anyone else. We may hurt ourselves only. We feel, maybe my life is itself jinxed. And nothing is going to work for me. On the other side, if we focus on the fair part, there are some areas where I've got worse than what I deserve. But there are areas where I've got better than what I deserve. So just today afternoon, I was speaking online to a group of professionals at Intel. There's a corporate talk I gave. So speaking on a different topic, it was more about self-esteem and self-improvement. So there's one person who asked this question that, what if we feel that, we are beyond self-improvement? Not that we are so good, but that we are so bad that there's no hope for us to improve. What if we feel that my life is so terribly wrong? So then I told him that, I'm sorry you feel like that. However, if we are just alive, then there is more right than wrong in our lives. Just to be alive is a gift. Whatever be our age, there are so many people who don't live up to our age. Some people just die when they're small children. Some people die in their youth. So if we are alive, the world is not done with us till now. There is something more for our life. So we can look at what is wrong in our life, or we can look at what is right in our life. And the divine and demoniac natures are ultimately boiling down to this choice. We all have a starting point and we can't change it. What kind of conditionings we have, what kind of conditions we have. Now, I could look at both of these and say my conditionings are better than what I deserve. My conditions are worse than what I deserve. Same applies for the conditionings and the conditions. So ultimately, if we decide that, okay, I am going to focus on what is good about my conditions and what is good about my conditionings. So the past we get, it's not a completely bad package. It may not be a completely good package, but it's not a completely bad package. And ultimately, spirituality, it's not just about, oh, maybe there is some other world and we are meant to go to that world. It is that there is a higher reality to the world, and that higher reality, as I said, wants good for us and wants us to be good. Wants each one of us to develop our higher side. So how do we do that? That's what I'll conclude with. So broadly, there are two things that are required for us to change ourselves. There are bonds and there are boundaries. Okay, bonds and boundaries. That what is it that inspires someone to change? What does it inspire someone to make a good choice? So there has to be some bond somewhere. You develop a bond with someone. Maybe when we are growing up, we had a teacher who believed in us. The teacher encouraged us. Maybe we had some relative. Somewhere, so we develop a bond with, either it could be some person, it could also be with some ability, some talent, something which we are interested in, something that is beyond ourselves, something that is bigger than ourselves. So there is bond. So basically, the bonds enable us to focus on something positive. And then there are boundaries. Every one of us, we have certain conditionings. And if those conditionings are not to get the better of us, not get the better out of us, but get the better of us, then that means they ruin us, then we need to set boundaries. If somebody is, say, trying to recover from alcoholism, they're a recovering alcoholic and their house is right next to a bar, then what's going to happen? There'll be no bar for them to go to the bar. So each one of us needs to create some boundaries. So the Gita talks about this as, the Sanskrit words are abhyasa and vairagya. So vairagya is detachment, but detachment is best done through establishing boundaries. And abhyasa, practice, is done by establishing a bond. So wherever we are right now, what can be a bond to? In whatever situation I am in, is there something of value that I can do? In the situation that I am in, there could be bad things around me, but is there something of value. So, all of you could have chosen to be at home and watch TV or just look at Instagram reels or just do so many other things. You chose to come here to maybe to learn something of value. So, for all of us, within whatever constraints we are put in by our conditions and our conditionings, can I do something of value? So, there is a ultimate meaning and ultimate value to life. But there is something which we can start with right now. So we develop bonds with that. And then that small bond slowly starts building up. And the boundary is basically we create something to protect ourselves. The boundaries can sometimes be from people, boundaries can be from places, but boundaries so that our conditionings don't overwhelm us. So among the bonds that we can develop, say we did some mantra chanting, we did some kirtan before, then we did some mantra chanting after the kirtan also, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So these are practices by which we bond with a higher reality. Our consciousness rises upwards, we become aware that there is a higher reality. We try to bring ourselves in the presence of something bigger than ourselves. Now, we may not even consciously be aware that that's what we are doing. But just, it seems that when we sing these mantras, we invoke these divine sounds, we feel as if we are coming towards, we feel calmer, we feel clearer. So we create a bond with something of value within whatever situation we are in. And then we create boundaries. So this one diagram is what I'll conclude with now. That for each one of us, we have bonds and we have boundaries. Now the opposite would be that we have no bonds and we have no boundaries. Okay. The same thing, it's boundaries. So bonds and boundaries and no bonds and no boundaries. Now if somebody has no bonds and no boundaries, then this is the darkest situation to be in. Mm-hmm. That means they have nothing of value that will in their life that will inspire them to do something positive. Mm-hmm. And then they live in a culture where there are no boundaries, or they have not set any boundaries for themselves. So somebody has anger issues and they keep a gun always with them. Now, that's a deadly combination, isn't it? It's like, okay, if I have anger issues, then maybe I should not keep anything that I could use while I become violent. So there are bonds and boundaries. If you have neither, then that is a very difficult situation to be in. Now the best is if we have bonds and we have boundaries. That means, okay, this is what I want to do in my life. This is how in my life there can be increasing value. So we may be studying in school, we may be having a job, we have some family responsibilities, we have some talents, we have some gifts, and we would like to do justice to those gifts. We like to contribute something of value. See, the world may be a dark place, but each one of us has the capacity to light one candle. We can't remove the world's darkness, but we can light one candle. So the gifts that I have, I can do something of value with them. So if we have bonds and I want to do something of value, and then I make sure that I'm not having situations repeatedly where I'm vulnerable. I create some boundaries for myself. So broadly, boundaries could be in terms of people and places. There are some people who just seem to trigger us, who seem to bring out the worst within us, who seem to get joy in bringing out the worst within us. Maybe so then we need boundaries. Now, if we have boundaries but no bonds, then this is where we become resentful. Because if there are only boundaries and no bonds, then the boundaries just seem like, why can't I do this? Why should I not do this? So it's not so much an issue of morality that XYZ is moral or immoral. It's a matter of personal evolution. That Much of the religion in the world today has become, unfortunately, a matter of setting boundaries without really telling us about bonds. Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. So this is not a criticism of Christianity, but it's indicative of religion. I was in Scotland, and there was one friend who told me, he was atheist before, and he said that he allowed an atheist spoof on this. He says, in the beginning was the word. In the beginning was the word, and the word was no. So that's a variant on the Bible. In the beginning was the word, and the word was God. So the word was no. So you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do that. So now, if somebody grows up in that kind of environment where the purpose of boundaries is not told, then why should I not do this? It just leads to a lot of resentment, and that resentment leads to rebellion. So ultimately, when we talk about boundaries, if you're going on the road, we want to go on the road ahead, and the road may have boundaries so that we don't slip off the road and fall off the road. So the purpose of the boundaries is not to stay within the boundaries. The purpose of the boundaries is to go in a particular direction without getting distracted. So without bonds, boundaries seem suffocating. They cause resentment. Sorry, this would be, there are boundaries but no bonds. Now, if there are bonds but there are no boundaries, then what happens? This is where we stay very vulnerable. So, if somebody wants to be spiritual, but they constantly hang out with people who have no interest in spirituality. In fact, they're the opposite of spiritual. They're just way too materialistic. Then what is going to happen is they're going to get caught in that kind of materialism, selfishness, self-centeredness, short-sightedness. So for us, we may have some bonds. We may want to do something positive in our lives. We all have probably met some friends, who were attached to some friend who was dragging them down. And then even if you tell that person just holds on. And holding on to that person, they go down. So sometimes when we have bonds, okay, this is what I want to do in my life, but I have to see what are the boundaries that can help me to go in that direction. And so when both of these are created by us, so then if we establish bonds, we develop a relationship with people who want the best for us, who are wise, who are kind, who are helpful, and then we bond with them. And then we create boundaries for ourselves, whereby the conditionings within us don't get easy access for pulling us down. Then we will find that each one of us can actually be transformed. The divine side within us will be more and more manifested. And each one of us can go on this trajectory, acceptance to transcendence. Transcendence is where we manifest the spiritual glory that is there at our core. Every one of our lives has a higher purpose, and the higher purpose is what will bring about our own lasting happiness, will also help others to find lasting happiness. So another way to use this word is transcendence is magnificence. Magnificence means that now it is not that for a life to be magnificent, the person has to win a Nobel Prize or become famous in the world. If that happens, that's good. But if that hasn't happened, still our life can have value. So that is what spirituality and the Bhagavad Gita, they invite us to develop our higher nature and to fulfill a higher destiny that is waiting for all of us. So I'll summarize what I discussed today. Broadly, our topic was the nature of human nature. Now, why do people do what they do and whether it can be changed? So broadly, I talked about 3 points. The first point was, again, it's going down. Okay. nature of human nature. So first we talked about how now there are people who seem to get joy in hurting others. And we have all probably been hurt. So there are people who could be just narcissists. There are people who are bullies. And there are people who are sociopaths. This goes down a dark trajectory. So now it seems that there are people who, when they get hurt, they get a joy in hurting others. And that raises a question that, are some people innately bad? So we discussed that basically it's not that people are innate is different from inborn. So innate refers to the soul, inborn refers to the mind. So each one of, again it's cut off. Okay. Oh, okay, that's it. No, I cannot move this way. Okay, this was, okay, what can I do about this? Visible now? Okay. So then we discussed how each one of us, we have a physical side, our mental side, and then our soul, our spiritual side. So now in the mind, there are conditionings, and they may be a mix of positive and negative. So for those who have positive conditionings prominently, they are people of a divine nature. There are people who have negative conditionings, they're of a demoniac or negative nature. So now this is broadly the nature of human nature. So some people, we all have a starting point, but our conditions and our conditionings, we have conditionings and we have conditions. What do these lead to? You remember the 4 C's? Choices. And the choices lead to consequences. So this is essentially the life trajectory for us. Now the choices, these are affected, they're not determined. We are pushed, but we are not forced. We can counter push. So the essential choice that we have to make is that everybody will have grievance in their life. And from grievance, we can go down to, and somebody has hurt me, so I can go down and I can hurt that person back. We can go towards vengeance. And from there, malevolence. I just want to hurt everyone. Why should anyone be happy at all? But we have the opportunity to go the other way. That is acceptance. So acceptance, I talked about how life is unfair, but in the big picture, life is fairly unfair. That there is distress, there is pain, but we all sometimes get worse than what we deserve, and sometimes we get better than what we deserve. So that's what my mother taught me. Whatever lacks physically, God will provide intellectually. So if we look at the fair part rather than the unfair part, we'll be able to move forward, and from acceptance, we can come to transcendence. So transcendence is where we can we go beyond our conditions and conditionings, that we can bring out the higher side within us. And now how do we go about doing this? So for that, the last point I discussed was about bonds and boundaries. So for us to be able to make these good choices, so in one sense, these choices is the key. So to make good choices, we can look at what are the bonds I'm developing. Now bonds refer to something which is what is of value. What is it that I can do of value in the situation I am in? It may be very small what I can do right now, but can I do something of value? So our conditionings may limit us. Somebody could be terribly sick. Somebody could be hospitalized in a bed. And sometimes people are sick and they complain and gripe and blame others. They are sick and they make their caregiver sick of them. Or sometimes some people are sick and they decide, although I'm sick, I'm going to be polite with everyone. That's not a big difference, but it will make a big difference for them in that situation. So there are bonds. What is something of value I can do? And then there are boundaries. So if there are none, either of these is the darkest, there's only one of these, boundaries but no bonds, then that leads to resentment. Why should I not do this? Why should I not do that? And if there are only bonds but no boundaries, then there is vulnerability. We remain vulnerable because we may be ensnared by the lower side. This is the best. This is the most transformative. So for each one of us, if we are alive, there's more right than wrong in our lives. And we all have come to a certain distance. We all have achieved something in our life. And if despite we having certain conditions and conditionings, if we have come a particular distance, if we actually set up healthy bonds and healthy boundaries, then there's so much more each one of us can do. And discovering how much good we can do, discovers how much good we can become, that could be the greatest adventure of our life. And that is what it is that the Gita calls each one of us to. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Questions because of time?
Sure.
Hi, Sebastian.
Sure.
Thank you for your presentation. I have a question. Maybe you could speak on how when the conditions are very unfavorable, how is that like a test to our commitment to do good? And the more the conditions seem unfavorable, is more of a challenge and a push to endure and be good. It seems like resistance is a good push to develop spiritual.
Yes, true.
Yeah.
Now see the two different aspects over here. For all of us, when the conditions are difficult, it's important that we choose our battles.
Yeah.
That means that sometimes the conditions might be so difficult that it might just be impossible to do a particular thing. It's like if I'm lifting weights, we can lift weights that are slightly beyond our capacity. Somebody is used to lifting 20 kg weights and they try to lift a 60 kg weight. And soon they will become a 60 kg weight that somebody else has to lift on a stretcher. Is it? So the thing is that we cannot go too much beyond our capacity.
Yeah.
So sometimes you have to accept that this condition is such that maybe I'll not be able to do this. But it's not always like that. So choosing our battles means sometimes we may decide that this is not something which I would like to do, but I cannot do it right now. It may just require too much effort. So we have to see in this situation, what is it that I can do? So one principle is of making good choices. That's one aspect of acceptance. So acceptance of our conditions means that do what you can with what you have now. So that's a part of acceptance. So we may feel that we may have that attitude that tough conditions are good for me to grow. Yes, but sometimes it may be just too difficult. So if that is the case, then choose our battles. Maybe when I grow more, then I'll deal with this. So let me see what I can deal with right now. Because it's not just a matter of whether we can grow or not. It is a matter also of whether we can sustain it in the long run. So if transformation is not sustained, then sometimes that can be more discouraging than encouraging. So we set a very high bar for ourselves. We stick to it for some time. And afterwards, when we collapse, then what happens is, say if I am here, I think I can from here, I can just take a leap over here. I can go to a level, I can transcend my situation. But sometimes what happens from there, I go down here. So don't set too high expectations. Just see, okay, in this, what can I do in my situation? And there's always something we can do about it. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. You had a question? Or this? Yeah, please. You want to ask? Yes, yeah.
Okay. The question is, so when we feel like life is unfair and we see distress in life, oftentimes we go and we think there's no higher presence, there's no God, you know, because why would he create, if he wanted good, why would he create all this stuff that was bad, you know? So can you explain that dynamic?
Yeah.
Because that would mean he's bad because he's creating bad stuff.
Yeah. So this thing is that you can look at philosophy from two different ways. A philosophy, it has many different definitions. But one of the simple definitions that I like about philosophy is that philosophy is meant to help us make sense of things that don't make sense. That make sense of things that don't make sense. So ultimately, it's a matter of choice. See, broadly, there are three options with respect to there being some higher reality. That either that, I like to use the acronym FAN for that. We have to fan our choices, good choices. F is there's a higher reality that is favorable to us, or there's a higher reality that's against us, or there is a higher reality that is non-existent. There are about three possibilities. Now, if that higher reality were against us, then that higher reality could have destroyed us long ago, isn't it? If there is some people, somebody who has the terrorists who had an agenda to eliminate a particular community, if they had the opportunity, they would have done it immediately. So the very fact that we are alive would suggest that that higher power is not against us. Now, the question of why bad things happen to us is a complex question. And ultimately, philosophy does have this axiom that rather than starting with some ideal, we start with where we are. This is what life is. And what is the worldview that can best help me to make sense of my life right now? Or what is the worldview that can best help me to move ahead positively from where I am? So, if I consider that there is a higher being and that higher being wants something good for me, then there is some evidence for that. What is the evidence? I said the very fact that we are alive. There are so many ways in which things can go wrong. And one of my friends was an atheist while growing up. Then she became a gynecologist. And she said, it's just studying the whole process of birth. There are so many things that can go wrong within that. And that anybody is born, that is a miracle. So if you just look at life, it's actually something very significant. So I would say that's the way we start off. And ultimately, we have to make a choice. As I said, life is all about choices. So if I'm going to go around with the belief that there is some being out there who's out to get me, then that's a very dark way to live. Now, is that? Maybe there is there. We don't know. No. But even if it is there, if that's what we are going to be conscious of all the time, our own mind will be very dark and our life will become very dark. So maybe as a test case, let me experiment. That if I accept that there is some higher being who wants good for me, and even when some bad things happen, maybe there is some higher purpose for it. And what that higher purpose, I don't know right now, but maybe there is. Just keep myself open to that. If we decide, okay, this is how I'm going to live for the next 3 months, like 6 months, that whatever happens in my life, there is some higher purpose. There is some higher plan for my life. And that will lead to a certain level of curiosity.
Always have to work, do our karma, and also make choices that can lead us to that destiny. And everybody wants good destiny for themselves. Now, the social conditionings added with the bonds that we have might deteriorate from the choices that we are making, or it might make the choices a bit difficult to even make at a point. Like we cannot choose to not choose at all. We have
Yeah,
to choose
correctly.
something because time is also limited for us,
Yeah,
like
true.
humans, right? So it becomes difficult to even decide on when to choose. Added to that, there is a complexity on whether I am choosing is right or wrong. So I would want to know your thoughts on that, like how to get out of this cycle, or maybe how to live this thought better.
Okay, let me rephrase the question as much as I understood it. You're saying that, even if there is a positive destiny for us in the future,
Yes.
we have to make choices to get there.
True.
And sometimes our own social conditions and conditionings, they may limit us from making those choices. And even when we are making choices, how do we know that the choice is the right choice? Okay. Well, the fact is we can't know. And that can make life into an adventure. Rather than seeing that as causing anxiety, that we can see it that it's not that there is, when we say there is a plan for our life, that does not mean necessarily that there is some predefined path along which I have to walk. And if I just go one step off that path, then I'm lost. It's not like that. No, we all have been given individuality. We all have been given free will. And it's not that free will has not been given so that we become like robots and we don't think and just do a particular thing. So if we consider parents, all over the world when I travel, often parents, they're concerned that their children don't listen to them. The children are headaches and heartaches for them sometimes. So if some parents complain a bit too much, I say, so would you like to replace your child with a perfectly obedient robot? No, many parents say that, I would like to have a robot, but in addition to a child, not in the replacement of my child. Isn't it? Because the thing is that we don't want as parents, we may want the best for our children, but that doesn't mean that we want our children to become robots. The same applies from the perspective of divinity also. That it is not that our autonomy, our free will is meant to be taken away completely. It is the example that is given us. There's a mountain and there's an ocean. So each one of us is meant to be like a stream of water. And each one of us has to find our way to the ocean. So the ocean is the divine. And we reach the divine and there's a union of love there. So now a river, it has in one sense a universal purpose. All rivers have one purpose, that is to reach the ocean. So we could say, but each river also has to find its own individual path. And even the path of the river changes. And while the river is going along, it does so much good to sustaining all the life forms that are there on its banks. So like that, each one of us is meant to be like a river. And based on whatever situations we are in, like sometimes the river just faces a block. Then it has to maybe go down. Sometimes the rivers go underground completely. And then they must sometimes go left, go right, go above. Or just sometimes just go through. Erode the plot. So like that, each one of us, we have our individuality. And we make the best choice that we can in that situation. And sometimes even if that's a wrong choice, if we have been thinking carefully, we've been trying to make a good choice, we are trying to develop our wisdom, we are connecting with spiritual sources of wisdom, spiritual guides who are helping us to make good choices, then even if we make a go off, we will come back soon on track. So, in many ways, when a flight, I just came from India to here just a couple of days ago. So when a flight is say going from Delhi to New York, now the flight doesn't go in a straight line. The flight keeps going off track in one sense. So what keeps the flight on track is that there is constant reorientation. So similarly for us, sometimes we make some choices and we realize, hey, maybe that was not the best choice. And there's no need to beat ourselves up on that. Okay, now I realize it. Now as soon as I realize, let me pull back and come back on track. And sometimes even going on that diversion will also help us to learn something. It could help us to come back on track and go further faster after that. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, for dissecting this beautiful topic. He's so expert, isn't he? Just, if you can like, none of us can do that. So to be able to explain such difficult subject matters in such easy words, that takes a lot of wisdom. And I think your mom was right.
Thank you.
So also, Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, he has wrote a couple books, and if you like, they're how much, Prabhu?
Yeah, it's one is Gita for the CEO. This is 10. This is 15. Both together 20. This is basically many of the points that I spoke about, finding our purpose and facing suffering. This is basically the Gita presented in a corporate context. Gita is a spiritual book that helps us to grow spiritually, but those spiritual principles can also help us grow in our daily life. So I presented this as a conversation between two people. One is a leader in the corporate world, and another is an aspiring leader. And one knows the Gita, one wants to know the Gita. So I have some simple, like the kind of sketches that I was drawing. Let's explain the concepts also. So how to be resilient, how to be sensitive in our speech, how to be more, how to develop a vision for our life, how to at the same time cultivate detachment for setting boundaries. So many of these principles that I talked about are mentioned in this book. And this is more of a devotional book. This is about prayers inspired by Bhagavad Gita. So each of these is one prayer with one image of the divine and the short prayer. So regarding suffering, bless me to lead with dignity and dedication during distress. So make me a truth seeker, not a blind follower or a blind rejecter. So each of these is a reflection. If you're going through some difficult situations in our life, want some connection with the divine, a short prayer reflection is there in this book. And if you want this, I'm available here. I can sign the books also. And if you have any further questions, we can talk at a one-to-one level. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you. And now we will have a 5-minute